Orleans. I always start by saying I'm going to talk about politics, which, as you all know, comes from the Greek word polis, which means many, and ticks, which means blood-sucking insects. And this is an extraordinary time to be watching blood-sucking insects. It's a whole new day in Washington. Even though it looks like the same old day, it really is different, and I'm going to try to describe ways that I think it can be different. What we do know so far is a lot has changed in 4 years. Certainly circumstances have changed. The financial crisis is over. The economy, although slowly, is growing again. One war is over, Iraq. Another war is winding down, Afghanistan. The president was reelected, but more importantly, he was reelected decisively. And the internals of the election results were extremely significant and are already having big effects in Washington. We can talk about that. But more than anything else, I think what's changed in 4 years is the president's basic theory of the case, his basic theory of how he should conduct his presidency. In his first inaugural address, and really in his first term, the theory of the case was all about fixing a broken political system. It was about post-partisanship and bridging divides, and he was going to usher in a new era of comedy and bipartisan agreement, and both parties would reason with each other and stop demonizing each other, and everyone would be civil. In retrospect, that sounds not only naive, it sounds preposterous. So now he has a new theory of the case. Instead of an above-the-fray presidency, we're going to have a more traditional, realistic, I think, view of politics. And that is that politics is not something to be disdained, which I think President Obama did for most of the first term. Politics is an epic battle of clashing visions, especially in a polarized country like ours. So on Monday, last Monday, the president laid out his vision, and the Republicans have theirs, and they're going to battle it out, and hopefully in the end they will compromise in good faith for the good of the country. That's what politics is. There's nothing kind of awful about that. In the president's second inaugural address, we saw somebody liberated from ever having to run again, and also in pretty good shape politically. He came to that address with his approval ratings in the low to mid-50s. The Republicans are struggling to figure out what they do next. The economy is starting to grow, so he was on pretty solid ground. He laid out a full-throated vision of activist government. There's been a tremendous amount of commentary in Washington and elsewhere that it was a liberal, kind of left-wing speech and agenda. The Republicans say they were astounded and appalled, and he lurched to the left. Now, there's no doubt that the speech was liberal rhetorically. The tone was liberal. The rhetoric was liberal. He made the first mention of gay rights ever in an inaugural address. He talked a lot about climate change, more than he ever has in the past. He defended entitlement programs. He made a jab at Paul Ryan when he said, you know, Medicare and Social Security do not make us a nation of takers. He talked about economic and social equality and prosperity built on the broad shoulders of the middle class. So these are all traditional democratic progressive values. And I would agree with Republicans that the speech was notable for its almost complete and utter lack of any olive branches to the other side. That's usually a kind of traditional part of inaugural addresses, and especially second-term ones. You know, the rhetoric of the new chapter and a time for renewal, and let us put aside our divisions. And at times it did seem like he was rehashing the kind of populist arguments of the presidential campaign. However, when you look at the actual agenda that he was proposing and the substance, to me it doesn't look like some new big left-wing program. The president does have a very ambitious agenda. I wouldn't call it super left-wing. He knows he has only about 12 to 18 months to get this stuff done before he becomes a true lame duck. The Republican Party is regrouping and trying to figure out what it needs to do in the future, but it's still very formidable in Washington. Second terms are infamous for miscalculations and arrogance and overreach. We'll see if that happens to President Obama. Certainly it happened to George W. Bush, who said famously after he was reelected, "I have political capital and I intend to spend it." and he did spend it all at once, and then it was gone when he tried to reform Social Security. There's also the rest of the world, which hasn't gone away. There's Iran and North Korea and Syria and the Middle East and Al-Qaeda in Northern Africa, and there's all sorts of unexpected things that can happen to upend a president's well-laid plans. So I would just, my only advice to you is fasten your seatbelts